The distress signal reached Earth's monitoring stations at exactly 14:32 Universal Standard Time. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her screens in disbelief, her coffee growing cold as she processed what she was seeing. The transmission was unlike anything in their databases, a complex mathematical sequence that pulsed with desperate urgency across multiple frequencies. "Director Martinez, you need to see this," she called across the bustling command center of Earth's deep space communications array. Her voice carried an edge that made every technician in the room look up from their work. Director Luis Martinez jogged over, his weathered face creased with concern. 20 years of monitoring space had taught him to recognize that particular tone in his team's voices. "What have we got, Chen?" "First contact protocol activation. The signal is artificial, definitely intelligent, and..." She paused, her fingers dancing across her keyboard. "It's coming from the Kepler 442 system. That's 47 light-years away." Martinez felt his stomach drop. The implications hit him immediately. Any civilization capable of sending a coherent signal across that distance possessed technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. "Are you certain it's a distress call?" "The mathematical patterns match every theoretical model for universal help signals we've developed. Prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, and then..." Chen's voice trailed off as she pulled up another screen. "This part is what's really interesting. They're using our own emergency broadcast protocols." "What do you mean, our protocols? Remember the Voyager probes? The data we sent into space describing human civilization, our languages, our technology? Somehow they've learned from those signals and are using our own SOS formats. They know about us, Director." The command center fell silent except for the hum of computers and the steady beep of incoming data. Martinez stared at the scrolling information, his mind racing. "How long would it take us to respond?" "With our current fastest ships? About 800 years one way." Chen's reply hung heavy in the air. "And how long do you think they have?" Chen manipulated her display, analyzing the signal's degradation patterns and the increasing desperation in its repetition cycles. "Based on the deteriorating signal strength and the escalating frequency of transmissions, I'd estimate they have maybe weeks, possibly days." Martinez closed his eyes briefly. First contact with an alien species, and humanity was helpless to assist. The irony was bitter. Earth had spent decades preparing for this moment, developing protocols, training teams, imagining every possible scenario, except the one where they received a cry for help from beings they could never reach in time. "Sir," another technician called out, "we're getting secondary signals now. These are different. They appear to be tactical communications. Military frequencies." Chen's hands flew over her keyboard. "I'm detecting weapon signatures, energy discharges, and..." Her face went pale. "Massive gravitational distortions. Director, this isn't just a distress call. This is a war." The next few hours transformed the quiet research facility into a hub of frantic activity. Linguists, mathematicians, and military analysts flooded in as Earth's governments scrambled to understand what they were witnessing. The signals painted a terrifying picture of a civilization under siege. Dr. James Wu, the facility's lead xenolinguistics expert, worked feverishly to decode the transmissions. "They call themselves the Zalani," he announced during an emergency briefing. "Their mathematical language is incredibly sophisticated. They're describing attackers they call the Devourers, a species that consumes entire worlds." "Consumes how?" General Patricia Hayes demanded. She had arrived 3 hours ago with a full military escort, her uniform crisp despite the urgent circumstances. "From what I can interpret, the Devourers strip planets of all resources, biological, mineral, atmospheric. They leave nothing behind but dead rock." Wu's translation software chimed softly as new data streamed in. "The Zalani have been fighting them for what translates to roughly 200 Earth years." "And they're losing," Chen added grimly, monitoring the tactical signals. The energy signatures are weakening. Whatever defensive systems they have are failing. General Hayes stood silent for a moment, processing the implications. What kind of civilization are we dealing with here? What's their technological level? Advanced beyond anything we can imagine, Wu replied. They have faster-than-light communication, energy weapons, gravitational manipulation technology. But the Devourers. He paused, rechecking his translations. The Devourers adapt to everything. The Zalani describe them as a plague that learns and evolves with each world they consume. Why are they contacting us? Martinez asked the question that had been nagging at him. If they're so advanced, what could they possibly want from a species that can't even leave its own solar system effectively? Chen had been wondering the same thing. She pulled up the original signal analysis. I've been studying the transmission patterns. They're not just sending us their distress call, they're sending it to over 300 star systems simultaneously, every system with any indication of intelligent life. A general broadcast for help, Hayes muttered. Desperation. More than that, Wu interjected, his excitement barely contained. I've found something else in their transmissions. They're not just asking for help, they're sharing information. Technical specifications, star charts, cultural data. It's like they're trying to preserve their entire civilization in these signals. A final testimony, Martinez realized. They know they're going to die, so they're making sure someone remembers them. The room fell quiet as the weight of this realization settled over everyone. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, an entire species was fighting for survival against an enemy that had already decided their fate, and Earth could do nothing but watch and listen. But Dr. Chen wasn't ready to accept helplessness. What if we can't reach them physically, but we could reach them with information? What do you mean? Hayes asked. Our quantum communication experiments. We've been working on instantaneous data transmission across vast distances. It's theoretical, but if we could establish a quantum link, we could talk to them in real time, Wu finished, his eyes lighting up with possibility. Talk to them, yes, but more importantly, we could share information. Our military tactical databases, our strategic knowledge, our understanding of asymmetric warfare. Chen's mind was racing with possibilities. Hayes leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. You're suggesting we could help them fight more effectively? Think about it, Chen continued, warming to her theory. They've been fighting the same enemy for 2 centuries using the same tactics, the same strategies. What if we could offer fresh perspectives? Human military doctrine, guerrilla warfare tactics, psychological warfare strategies? Humans have been fighting each other for millennia, Martinez added slowly, beginning to see where this was leading. We've developed some of the most brutal and effective combat strategies in history. Wu was already working on his translation programs. If I can establish better communication protocols, we might be able to share complex tactical information. The question is, do we have time to set up a quantum link? How long? Hayes demanded. Chen consulted her calculations. 48 hours minimum, and that's if everything goes perfectly. Do it, Hayes ordered without hesitation. Whatever resources you need, you'll have them. If there's even a chance we can help these people, we have to try. As the team scattered to begin the impossible task of establishing first contact and potentially saving an alien civilization, none of them realized they were about to introduce the galaxy to something it had never encountered before: human warfare. The Zalani had reached out in desperation, hoping for any assistance. They were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous predator comes disguised as a helper. The quantum transmission array hummed to life 47 hours later, its exotic matter cores generating energy patterns that bent space-time itself. Chen's hands trembled slightly as she initiated the connection sequence, knowing that what they were about to attempt had never been tried across such vast distances. Signal lock established, her technician reported. We have a stable quantum entanglement with the Kepler 442 system. Opening communication channel, Wu announced, his fingers poised over the translation interface they had built in record time. The response came immediately, not in the desperate mathematical sequences they had been receiving, but in clear, structured communication. The Zilani had been waiting. Unknown benefactors, the translated message read. We are Kef Nalen, prime strategist of the Zilani Defense Coalition. Your signal has reached us in our darkest hour. We do not know who you are or where you come from, but we welcome any assistance you can provide. Wu typed rapidly, his response automatically translated into the Zilani's mathematical language. This is Earth. We received your distress call. We want to help you fight the Devourers. The pause lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours to everyone in the command center. When the reply came, it carried a weight of exhausted hope. Earth. Yes, we have learned of your species from the ancient signals that reached our space long ago. You call yourselves humans. We did not expect help from such a distant world, but we are grateful. However, we must warn you, the Devourers are unlike any enemy you have faced. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be deterred, and learn from every encounter. We have thrown our greatest weapons against them, our most brilliant strategies, and still they advance. What assistance can you offer that our 2 centuries of warfare have not already attempted? General Hayes stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen real combat. Tell them about human warfare. Tell them about Earth's history. Wu began typing, then paused. How do I explain human military doctrine to an alien species? Start with the basics, Hayes replied grimly. Tell them about total war. The translated message that Dr. Wu sent to Kef Nelen contained concepts that would forever change how the Zilani viewed warfare. Within it were detailed descriptions of human military history. Not the sanitized versions taught in schools, but the brutal reality of a species that had turned conflict into an art form. Wu's fingers moved steadily across his keyboard as he transmitted humanity's darkest knowledge. The humans of Earth have engaged in continuous warfare for over 10,000 cycles. Unlike your defensive strategies against the Devourers, human warfare is based on total destruction of the enemy's capability and will to fight. The response from Kef Nelen came quickly, tinged with what the translation software interpreted as confusion. We do not understand. How can one destroy an enemy's will? The Devourers have no emotions, no fears, no individual consciousness to target. General Hayes leaned over Wu's shoulder, dictating her reply. Then you change your target. Tell them about Sherman's march, about the strategic bombing campaigns, about scorched earth tactics. Wu hesitated. General, some of this information is exactly what they need to hear. Hayes cut him off firmly. These people are facing extinction. We don't have the luxury of being squeamish about our own history. The quantum link crackled with tension as Wu transmitted humanity's most ruthless strategic concepts. He described how General Sherman had deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure during the American Civil War, how the Allied forces in World War II had bombed industrial centers to cripple enemy production, how countless civilizations had employed scorched earth tactics to deny resources to invaders. The key principle, Wu typed, is that war is not just between armies. War is between entire civilizations. Every resource, every individual, every piece of infrastructure becomes part of the conflict. If the Devourers adapt to your military tactics, then you stop fighting them militarily. The silence from Kepler 442 stretched longer this time. When Kef Nelen finally responded, there was something different in the message structure. What Dr. Chen interpreted as a shift in emotional resonance. You speak of concepts that violate our fundamental understanding of conflict. We have always sought to minimize damage to non-combatants and preserve our worlds even during battle. Are you suggesting we Deliberately destroy our own planets to deny them to the Devourers? Hayes spoke without hesitation. If that's what it takes to win, yes. Tell them about Stalingrad. Tell them about the siege of Leningrad. Sometimes survival requires sacrificing everything to deny your enemy victory. As Wu transmitted these concepts, he included detailed tactical manuals that Earth's military had spent centuries perfecting. Psychological warfare techniques designed to break enemy morale. Asymmetric tactics for fighting technologically superior opponents. Guerrilla strategies for continuing resistance even after conventional forces were defeated. But it was Dr. Chen who made the connection that would prove most crucial. Wu asked them about the Devourers' resource consumption patterns. How do they process what they take from conquered worlds? The response revealed a critical weakness that the Zilani had never considered exploiting. The Devourers consume biological matter first, processing it through vast organic networks they construct on each world. These networks then break down mineral resources. The process is highly efficient, but requires approximately 47 of your days to fully strip a planet. Chen's excitement was visible. They're biological miners. That means they have biological vulnerabilities. Hayes immediately grasped the implications. Wu, transmit everything we have on biological warfare, viruses, bacteria, prions, chemical weapons. If these things process organic matter, we can poison the well. The next several hours saw a data transfer that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Earth's complete archives of biological and chemical warfare research streamed across the quantum link, not just the weapons themselves, but the strategic frameworks for deploying them, the psychological impact studies, and most importantly, the ethical justifications that allowed humans to use such weapons against their enemies. Kef Nalan's responses grew increasingly agitated. These concepts are disturbing. You describe warfare that targets not just soldiers, but entire ecosystems, weapons that cause suffering rather than clean death, strategies that turn planets themselves into weapons. Welcome to human warfare, Hayes replied through Wu's translation. We don't fight to prove we're better. We fight to survive, and will use any means necessary. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Marcus Reeves, Earth's leading expert in xenobiology, joined the conversation. He had been studying the Devourers' biological signatures from the Zilani's transmitted data, and what he found changed everything. They're not just biological miners, Reeves announced to the assembled team. They're a hive mind. The individual units are essentially organic machines controlled by central processing nodes. Wu transmitted this observation to Kef Nalan, who confirmed it. Yes, the Devourers operate through what you might call queen organisms. Destroy the queens, and the workers become inactive. But the queens are heavily defended and constantly mobile. We have never been able to locate them long enough to mount an effective assault. Reeves smiled grimly. That's because they're thinking about it wrong. They're trying to hunt the queens. We need to make the queens come to us. The strategy that emerged over the next few hours was quintessentially human in its ruthless simplicity. Instead of protecting their remaining worlds, the Zilani would prepare them as traps. They would appear to evacuate, leaving behind seemingly defenseless planets rich with the biological resources the Devourers craved. But hidden within those resources would be carefully engineered biological weapons designed to propagate through the Devourers' organic networks. It's called a honey trap, Hayes explained. You offer the enemy exactly what they want, but you poison it first. The biological weapons themselves were masterpieces of human military science, engineered viruses that would lie dormant until they detected the specific protein markers unique to Devourer biology, synthetic prions that would corrupt the neural networks linking workers to queens, chemical compounds that would accumulate in the queens themselves, slowly degrading their command and control capabilities. But the most important element, Reeves emphasized, is psychological warfare against their command structure. Wu struggled to translate this concept. How do you wage psychological warfare against a hive mind? You make them doubt their own intelligence, Dr. Sarah Liu, Earth's specialist in counterintelligence operations, explained. Every successful trap makes them question their assessment capabilities. Every poisoned world forces them to be more cautious, to slow their advance, to second-guess their own strategic decisions. The plan they transmitted to Kef Nilan was horrifying in its comprehensiveness. The Zalani would not just abandon worlds, they would turn them into weapons. Entire ecosystems would be seeded with dormant biological agents. Refugee populations would be deliberately infected with diseases that appeared harmless to Zalani physiology, but would prove devastating to devourer biology. Most ruthlessly, they would use the devourer's own efficiency against them. The invaders' rapid consumption patterns meant they would spread the biological weapons throughout their own networks before the effects became apparent. By the time the first queen organisms began showing symptoms, every connected worker would already be compromised. This is not warfare as we understand it, Kef Nilan transmitted, his mathematical language carrying overtones of what Wu interpreted as moral distress. You are asking us to sacrifice our own worlds, to poison our own people, to become something we are not. Hayes' response was delivered with military precision. You asked for our help. This is what human help looks like. We don't fight fair, we don't fight clean, and we don't fight with honor. We fight to win, period. If you want to preserve your species, you need to be willing to become monsters. The quantum link fell silent for nearly an hour. When it reopened, Kef Nilan's response carried a new quality, a hardness that hadn't been there before. We have discussed your proposals with our leadership council. We find your methods disturbing, but we also find them logical. The devourers have given us no choice but extinction or transformation. We choose transformation. The implementation will take time, Kef Nilan continued. We must prepare 17 worlds according to your specifications. Our biologists are working to synthesize the weapons you have described. But we have a question. How do we know these strategies will work? Dr. Chen answered before anyone else could speak. Because they worked on us. Every strategy we've given you, every tactical doctrine, every biological weapon. Humans have used all of these against each other. We know they work because we've survived them. The transmission that followed contained detailed historical records of human conflicts. The Black Death that killed a third of Europe, the systematic use of smallpox against indigenous populations, the chemical weapons of World War I, the nuclear devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Every example served to demonstrate that humans had not only developed these weapons, but had learned to survive their deployment. You are a terrifying species, Kef Nilan observed. We now understand why your homeworld appears in our databases as unsuitable for devourer consumption. They have analyzed your planet and classified it as a death world, too dangerous to approach. Hayes allowed herself a grim smile. They got that right. Earth isn't just our home, it's our weapon. Everything that lives here had to learn to be dangerous just to survive another day. The final transmission of that session contained perhaps the most important insight of all. We understand now that we have been fighting the wrong war. We have been trying to preserve what we were instead of becoming what we need to be. You humans have survived because you embrace change, even terrible change. We must learn this skill. As the quantum link closed for the day, the team at Earth's communication center sat in contemplative silence. They had just shared knowledge that could save an alien civilization, but they had also fundamentally altered who those aliens were. The Zalani who emerged from this war would not be the same species that had sent the original distress call. Dr. Wu finally broke the silence. General, are we doing the right thing? We've essentially given them instructions on how to become us, how to become capable of terrible things. Hayes studied the tactical displays showing the distant war. Dr. Wu, right and wrong are luxuries for people who aren't facing extinction. The Zilani asked for help, and we gave them the only kind of help we know how to give. Whether they use it or not is their choice. Chen was already preparing for the next day's transmission. Besides, she added quietly, it's too late to have second thoughts. They've already started implementing the plans. According to their last update, the first trap worlds are already being prepared. The war was about to change in ways that the Devourers could never anticipate. Because for the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, they were about to encounter prey that thought like predators. 6 weeks after Earth first responded to the Zilani distress call, the quantum communication array hummed with urgent activity. Dr. Wu barely looked up from his translation interface as status updates flooded in from the Kepler 442 system. The Zilani had transformed from desperate refugees into something the galaxy had never seen before: aliens who fought like humans. First contact with Devourer advance forces in the Kethmar system, Wu announced to the assembled team. The tactical display showed real-time updates as the battle unfolded 47 light-years away. The Zilani have evacuated the civilian population and initiated the honey trap protocol. General Hayes studied the incoming data with professional interest. How are they holding up psychologically? It's one thing to agree to these tactics, it's another to actually implement them. The response came from Kef Nalen himself, his mathematical language now carrying what Wu had learned to recognize as cold determination. We have discovered something disturbing about ourselves, human allies. Your methods are not as foreign to us as we initially believed. Once we abandoned our restrictions on acceptable tactics, we found that we are quite capable of terrible efficiency. Dr. Chen monitored the biological weapon deployment sensors they had helped the Zilani install. The Devourers have begun their consumption process on 3 separate worlds. Infection vectors are spreading exactly as predicted. Initial exposure rates are holding at 97% efficiency. But it was the psychological warfare reports that truly demonstrated how completely the Zilani had absorbed human military doctrine. Rather than simply abandoning worlds, they had begun an elaborate campaign of deception that would have impressed Earth's most devious strategists. Explain the refugee ship protocol to me again, Dr. Reeves requested, reviewing the Zilani's latest innovation. Wu pulled up the relevant files. They're using actual refugee vessels filled with actual civilians, but they've engineered the life support systems to produce specific atmospheric signatures that trigger Devourer feeding responses. When the Devourers capture the ships, they absorb the passengers immediately. And the passengers are carrying modified gut bacteria that produce compounds lethal to Devourer neural networks. The refugees genuinely don't know they're carrying biological weapons. From their perspective, they're just fleeing the invasion. Hayes whistled softly. Unwitting biological warfare delivery systems using their own people as ammunition. They're learning fast. The true scope of the Zilani's transformation became apparent over the following days as reports streamed in from across their remaining territory. Every aspect of their society had been reorganized around the principle of total war that humanity had taught them. They've established breeding programs, Dr. Liu reported, reading the latest intelligence updates. Not for population replacement, but for creating individuals with specific biological markers that make them more effective as biological weapon carriers. Their educational system has been completely restructured, Wu added. Children are now being trained from birth in deception, camouflage, and guerrilla warfare techniques. They're creating an entire generation that thinks like human special forces operators. But perhaps most disturbingly, the Zilani had begun developing their own innovations based on human principles. Their deep understanding of their own biology, combined with human tactical thinking, had produced weapons that Earth's military had never imagined. "They've weaponized their own death," Kef Nealon reported matter-of-factly. "When a Zilani dies, our bodies release specific pheromones as part of the natural decomposition process. We have enhanced these pheromones to serve as attraction signals for devourer scouts. Our corpses now serve as bait to draw enemies into predetermined killing zones." Dr. Reeves stared at his screen in fascination and horror. "They're using their own funeral rites as tactical weapons." "It gets worse," Wu continued reading. "They've modified their reproductive cycle. Pregnant Zilani now carry engineered parasites that activate if the mother is consumed by devourers. The parasites are designed to corrupt the devourer's digestive processes from within." Hayes leaned back in her chair, recognizing the logical endpoint of the doctrines they had shared. They've turned their entire life cycle into a weapon. Birth, death, reproduction. Everything is now part of their war machine. The quantum link crackled with an urgent transmission from the front lines. "Kethmar system reports confirmed elimination of primary devourer queen organism. Secondary queens are showing signs of coordination breakdown. Biological weapons have exceeded projected effectiveness by 300%. The command center erupted in cheers, but the celebration was short-lived. The next transmission carried news that sobered everyone immediately. "Devourer response has been unexpected," Kef Nealon reported. "They have initiated a protocol we have never observed before. Instead of continuing their consumption pattern, they are sterilizing infected worlds with extreme energy weapons. They are burning out entire biospheres to prevent further contamination." Dr. Chen frowned at her displays. "The devourers are adapting to biological warfare. They're sacrificing immediate resource gains to prevent long-term contamination." "How many worlds?" Hayes asked. 17 confirmed sterilizations," Wu translated. "The devourers have basically given up on consuming Zilani territory and are now focused on preventing the spread of our biological weapons to other systems." But Kef Nealon's next transmission revealed that the Zilani had anticipated this response. "We have prepared for this contingency using your historical models of Japanese kamikaze tactics and Irish Republican Army cell structures. If the devourers will not allow us to poison their consumption process, we will poison their expansion corridors." The strategy the Zilani unveiled over the next few hours was breathtaking in its scope and ruthlessness. They had quietly seeded dozens of uninhabited worlds along major devourer expansion routes with dormant biological weapons. These worlds appeared completely lifeless, but contained carefully engineered ecosystems that would activate when devourers attempted to establish forward bases. More insidiously, they had begun using refugee populations as unwitting infiltrators. Zilani civilians fleeing the war zone carried modified pathogens that would remain dormant for months before activating. By the time symptoms appeared, these refugees would have been distributed across dozens of worlds outside the immediate war zone. "We are no longer fighting to save our territory," Kef Nealon explained. "We are fighting to ensure that the devourers never successfully expand beyond our region of space. If we cannot survive, we will make certain that our deaths prevent them from consuming anyone else." Dr. Liu recognized the strategy immediately. "Scorched Earth doctrine taken to its logical extreme. They're turning their entire species into a biological firewall." But the most shocking development came when the Zilani began reporting success rates that exceeded even the most optimistic human projections. The biological weapons weren't just killing individual devourer organisms, they were causing systemic failures in the entire devourer network. "We believe we have identified the core weakness in their species," Kef Nealon transmitted. "The devourers are not actually a naturally evolved species. They are artificial constructs, likely created by another civilization as biological mining equipment. This explains their efficiency, but also their vulnerability. They were never designed to handle biological warfare because their creators never anticipated encountering it. Hayes felt a chill as the implications became clear. They're not an invading army. They're runaway terraforming equipment. That's why they've been so effective, Dr. Reeves added excitedly. They were designed to process biospheres efficiently, not to fight wars. They've probably been expanding for thousands of years without ever encountering real resistance. The revelation transformed everything. The Devourers weren't evil conquerors. They were tools that had outlived their creators and continued their programming without oversight. But that knowledge didn't make them any less deadly to the species they consumed. It also means they have critical system vulnerabilities, Chen observed. If they're artificial constructs, they probably have built-in control protocols. The final phase of the war began when Earth's computer scientists joined the Quantum Link. Within days, they had helped the Zilani identify and exploit fundamental flaws in the Devourer control architecture. The biological weapons had already compromised their command networks. Now, cyber warfare attacks targeted their core programming. Confirmed deactivation of Devourer fleet in Sector 7, Wu reported as updates streamed in. All units have entered standby mode. The Zilani are broadcasting shutdown commands using the original control frequencies. One by one, Devourer fleets across the region began going dormant as their artificial intelligences received properly formatted deactivation signals. The biological weapons had weakened their systems enough for the control protocols to take effect. The war that had raged for 2 centuries ended not with a climactic battle, but with the Devourers simply turning off like machines whose warranty had expired. Kef Nalan to Earth, came the final transmission. The Devourer threat has been neutralized. All active units have been deactivated and are being dismantled for study. We owe our survival to your species' wisdom in the art of warfare. Hayes stared at the tactical displays showing the now peaceful Zilani space. Wisdom. Is that what we shared with them? We shared survival, Wu replied quietly. Whether that's wisdom depends on what they do with it. The Quantum Link remained active as the Zilani began the process of rebuilding their civilization, but the species that emerged would be fundamentally different from the one that had sent the original distress call. They had learned to think like humans, to fight like humans, to embrace the terrible pragmatism that had allowed humanity to survive on a death world. As reports came in of other civilizations across the galaxy reaching out to both Earth and the Zilani for military assistance against various threats, it became clear that humanity had done more than save one species. They had introduced an entirely new form of warfare to a galaxy that had never seen anything like human military doctrine. Dr. A. Wu, General Hayes said as she prepared to return to Earth's military headquarters, make sure our next communication includes instructions on peace. Peace, General? Yes. We taught them how to be monsters. Now we need to teach them how to stop being monsters when the war is over. That's the only part of being human that actually matters. The Quantum Link hummed with data as Earth began transmitting its most important knowledge. Not how to fight, but how to choose when not to fight. For in the end, the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence, but their ability to control that violence and choose when to be something better. The galaxy had been introduced to human warfare, but now it needed to learn about human wisdom. The Zilani had survived by becoming like humans. Now they needed to learn how to become better than humans, and that would be humanity's greatest gift to the stars. Not the knowledge of how to fight, but the wisdom of when fighting was no longer necessary.